Buy low and sell high are the words to live by whenever you're flipping anything, be it sports collectibles, stocks, or real estate. But today, we're applying this mantra to clothing items. You can often find vintage and even designer clothing brand items for as little as a few dollars. From there, you can flip those finds online at one of the many online clothing marketplaces, often for massive profits. This is a great side hustle to get started with because secondhand clothing is one of the cheapest things you can buy, due to the fact that you'll be finding most of these items at thrift stores, consignment stores, and flea markets. These characteristics also make it one of the most accessible side hustles to get into. So in this video, we'll cover all of the basics of secondhand clothing arbitrage and how you can flip clothes for a profit. We'll start by giving you the basics of this side hustle. Then, we'll discuss where you can find the best items to flip and what you should be on the lookout for. Once you've found some great clothes, you'll need to list them on a marketplace. So we'll cover the best platforms to use for listing your items. Finally, we'll wrap up with some tips for getting started so that you can maximize your profits along the way. Don't worry, even if you've only got a few dollars to get started, this video should help you make that first successful flip and get the ball rolling on your clothes flipping journey. Let's take a look. Flipping clothes for profit, the basics. Again, used clothing arbitrage is the practice of purchasing secondhand clothing, potentially improving it or repurposing it, and then selling it for a profit online. This makes it pretty similar to other kinds of businesses, because you'll need to start with a general business plan, you'll need a budget, and you'll need to identify a target audience to sell your products to. You'll also need to establish a storefront on one of the online marketplaces. E-commerce marketplaces like Poshmark, Mercari, and Etsy are excellent places to sell your brand name, vintage, and upcycled clothing finds. But some people prefer to sell their clothes on platforms like Amazon, eBay, or Facebook Marketplace. We'll cover some of the pros and cons of each of these later in the video. Once you've figured out where to sell your clothing, it's best to test the waters before investing too much money in this business. If you have a closet full of brand name clothes already, it might be a good idea to first try listing some of your own items to see how they fare on the platform you've selected. Starting with what you already own is also a great hack for getting started if you don't have a budget yet. In doing so, you can raise some money to go out and purchase items with the specific intention of flipping them. Realizing that someone else may desire the clothes in your closet that you no longer wear is also a great lesson to start thinking about, because this applies to every piece of secondhand clothing you'll be dealing with. Sourcing your inventory. If you're not interested in starting with your own clothing, you'll need to start by finding some clothes to flip. Again, we want to focus on the buy low and sell high motto by seeking out items that are underpriced and undervalued. By connecting these items with buyers who recognize the value in the item, we're going to make a profit. This means that oftentimes, we'll be looking in places like thrift stores and yard sales to find overlooked items that may have been forgotten about. You can always start at thrift stores like Goodwill and Salvation Army, as most cities have at least one of these nearby with pretty sizable inventories. However, these stores are also pretty well known, so it's possible that they're already being picked through by other flippers and thrifters. In fact, Goodwill in particular will not place its valuable items in the store, and will instead list them online and auction them off to get better prices for them. All this means that you may be better off checking out local and independently operated thrift stores. In these types of locations, there's a better chance that trendy vintage and designer clothing have slipped under the radar. Specifically, you'll want to look for those that are considered bin digging stores, which don't even sort through their own merchandise. In these stores, you'll literally have to dig through inventory to find items, but this means that you could potentially find valuable items that no one else has come across yet. This will give you the opportunity to pluck those valuable items at the lowest possible prices, especially because these stores don't even bother pricing individual items. Beyond thrift stores, you may also want to check out peddlers malls, flea markets, and garage sales. The former two, however, tend to be more curated and thus more expensive, while garage sales are all about luck of the draw. If you're trying to stock your shop with garage sale finds, you'll need to get up early and hit sales as soon as they open for the day if you want to beat out the competition. If this is something you're interested in, be sure to check out our previous video on a full guide for finding and flipping garage sale items. Clothing to look for. So now that you know where to go, you need to know what to look for. When you're out looking for clothes to flip, it's important to first know your niche. You don't want to start off selling just anything you can find. If you have an Etsy shop, for example, it's best just to focus on one category of items, such as vintage, handmade, or upcycled items. Beginners are probably best off starting with secondhand name brand clothing before getting into anything more niche. These items will be the easiest to identify, research, and price for online marketplaces. Starting here will allow you to ease into the side hustle with a high probability of success while you develop an eye for spotting items that your audience will find valuable. Simply seek out the name brand clothing you recognize, then look up completed listings on eBay to see what similar items sold for. You can also check out listings on Etsy, Poshmark, or Mercari that have a lot of views and sales to get an idea of what kind of items are in demand. Just keep in mind, you'll want to inspect the tags on these items closely and make sure they're all legitimate. You'll also want to avoid fast fashion brands like H&M or Forever 21, which typically have a reputation for having cheaply made products. Instead, focus on those legacy brands that are known to produce quality clothes like Patagonia, Under Armour, and Adidas. If vintage clothing is your niche, make sure that your items are actually vintage. A manufacturing year will typically be listed on the tag of the item, and if it's not, you can generally get a pretty good idea of the approximate age of it based on its condition and style. Most older clothes will also be a little more worn or pilled, so consider investing in a de-piller to prep your items for sale. As far as upcycling or repurposing goes, it's good to be aware of ongoing trends. At the moment, cottagecore is a pretty popular consumer trend. People love the quaint and folksy items that remind them of simpler times. This often includes things like denim overalls and sunflower patches. There's a lot of money to be made in repurposing items if you can adapt to current fashion trends. But this is also one of the toughest areas to succeed in because it also requires a bit of skill with fabrics. You may need to apply patches, mend fabrics, adjust the fitting of certain items, and so on. Again, monitoring hot-selling items on clothing marketplaces can be a great indicator of what to look out for here. Listing your items. Now that you've found some items, you'll need to list them online and start making some sales. One of the biggest pitfalls that new clothing flippers succumb to is undervaluing their clothes. People are willing to pay top dollar for well-curated secondhand clothing, so don't make the mistake of underpricing your items just because they're used. You may find an ugly Christmas sweater at your local Goodwill for just a couple of bucks, but that could be worth $20 or $30 to someone looking for the perfect thing to wear to an ugly Christmas sweater party. Again, I'll keep saying this, but monitoring what similar items are selling for is the best way to get top dollar for your items. Keep an eye on trends and don't be shy about pricing your items to make a profit. If it doesn't sell, you can always accept offers or lower the price later. As with selling anything online, you'll always want to give your items a clear description and tons of photos. Your description should highlight the features of the items, especially if there is anything that's not in great condition. Even the smallest tears, frills, and stains should be disclosed so your buyer knows exactly what they're getting. Using photos can help display the severity of any imperfections and will again inform the buyer of exactly what they're getting. The good thing is that many people looking for secondhand clothing are usually willing to accept small amounts of wear or damage, because that just adds character to the vintage look. Even items that look a little worn can fetch a great price and an excited buyer. The only thing left to figure out is where to list these items, so let's take a look at the top platforms for flipping your secondhand clothing. Poshmark. Poshmark is extremely popular among the younger, more fashion-forward consumers who prefer to shop for brand name and designer clothing items. While you are limited to only selling trendier and more sought-after brand names on their site, Poshmark offers clothing flippers an excellent place to sell their items at a higher price tag. Poshmark's fees, however, can be a bit steeper than some other marketplaces. For sales under $15, for example, they take a flat commission of $2.95. For sales above $15, Poshmark will receive a 20% cut of your sale. While this might sound a little excessive, the fact that you're dealing with more valuable designer products means that you'll probably still be getting a pretty decent payoff from each sale, as long as you're finding high-quality name brand products. Mercari. Mercari promotes their marketplace as a place to buy and sell just about anything, from electronics to memorabilia, and of course, clothes. The Mercari app has been downloaded over 100 million times, so there are plenty of potential customers out there to sell your secondhand clothing finds too. Unlike Poshmark, which specializes in brand name clothing, and Etsy, which focuses on vintage, handmade, and upcycled items, you can sell pretty much anything and everything on Mercari. So if your niche is flipping fast fashion or middle-of-the-road clothing brands, you likely won't have much of a problem finding buyers on Mercari. Etsy. Contrary to popular belief, this platform is not just for crafts. You can also use it to sell all of your secondhand clothes. Millions of people turn to Etsy every day looking for clothes, but it's important to realize that you can't sell everything there. Etsy primarily wants its sellers to list vintage, handmade, and upcycled clothes, but there is a little bit of wiggle room here, especially for clothing items that don't necessarily meet their criteria for what constitutes as vintage. A vintage item is something that is at least 20 years old, but sometimes seller will pass things off as vintage by simply removing their tag or by crossing their fingers and hoping that Etsy won't give them a hard time for selling something that is slightly newer. But for the most part, you'll want to make sure that a majority of your listings don't violate their policies if you want to keep your shop in the clear. If you're a crafty type, then Etsy is the perfect place to flip handmade or upcycled clothes. Upcycling, also known as creative reuse, is the process of transforming products into new items that are perceived as being of greater quality. eBay. eBay is the most widely used site for reselling items online. It's a great option for sellers who wish to either put their items up for auction or set a fixed buy now price to flip their clothing a little bit quicker. While there are thousands, if not millions, of clothing items listed on eBay at any given time, it's important to know that they will charge a 10% fee on clothes that are priced for less than $100. Anything priced above $100, though, has a 0% fee. One of the benefits of listing your items on eBay is the freedom that the platform offers to sell any sort of clothes that you desire. You aren't limited to selling vintage, handmade, brand name, or upcycled items like some other marketplaces. So that's a pretty big selling point for some. Facebook Marketplace. Facebook Marketplace allows anyone with a Facebook account to sell virtually anything they want. What makes it stand out among the competition is the fact that they don't charge users a listing fee, and when you do make a sale, they only take a 5% transaction fee. The main advantage here is visibility. Facebook has literally billions of users at this point, allowing for a large segment of the population to see your listings. While Etsy and Poshmark are great platforms for specialty and niche items, Facebook Marketplace is ideal for selling clothing items that don't necessarily fall within those categories. It should be kept in mind, though, that the majority of consumers shopping on Facebook Marketplace are looking for the best deals possible. Since there are so many listings on the platform, you'll need to price your items pretty competitively if you want them to sell, which may mean lower profit margins. Tips and tricks for flipping clothes. By now, you should be ready to find, buy, and list items for sale on your marketplace of choice. But here are a few final tips for success with flipping clothes. First, keep all of your clothing as clean and pristine as possible. Buyers won't want to receive items covered in hair, dust, or other debris. You may want to wash your items before listing and selling them so that they're as clean as possible. Afterwards, you may want to hang them somewhere out of the way or keep them organized in bags and boxes where they'll be protected from pets or anything else in your home. Next, keep your online shop consistently stocked. If you have a lot of items in your inventory, people will be more likely to view your shop as legitimate and make more than one purchase. If you have lots of listings, this will drive up views, and the marketplace algorithms will be more likely to bring traffic your way. Be sure to respond to all questions submitted by buyers. People want to have their inquiries answered as soon as possible, and many platforms display these questions publicly, which can help further legitimize your shop and entice other people to purchase something. You could easily lose a sale if you aren't on top of things, and if you are prompt to reply, people will be a lot more inclined to lock in their purchase. Keep an eye on items that are sitting around in your shop for a while. If something has been listed for quite some time without many views, you might want to consider lowering its price. You can also use the sale feature on the app of your choice, which can indicate to buyers that the discount might not last long, resulting in an even quicker sale. When you do make a sale, remember that people love a personal touch, especially with secondhand and repurposed clothing. Consider making handwritten thank you notes to include with your shipments, and don't forget to leave a space to write in your customers' names. This can go a long way to encourage repeat customers. Finally, it's important both for tax purposes and your own records to keep track of all of your sales and expenses. Consider using something like a spreadsheet or even a bookkeeping application to keep track of all of this data. This will help you run your business efficiently and can also help you track trends within your sales to identify the items that bring in the most profit. While we certainly haven't covered every last detail of clothing flipping, there should be plenty to go off of to get started on this side hustle yourself. Again, you can get started for free with your own closet, work your way up to your first few items, and then continue to scale your business and develop your online store. Before you know it, this simple side hustle could turn into a full-time income. And again, if you want to learn how to flip garage sale items straight from the master, be sure to check out our previous video on doing garage sale arbitrage like Gary Vee. We'll see you in the next video.